So, in this talk about JSR, I'll specifically go a bit, first going to do a quick overview, and then also more into the behind the scenes, how it works, and how more runtimes can implement support for it. So first, what is JSR? JSR is a modern JavaScript registry, so similar to npm, you can imagine, but it does not replace npm. It works on top of it, but in addition, it adds many new features. For example, support for TypeScript out of the box. You don't need to do all the typing, like transpiling yourself. It's all done automatically by JSR. It's compatible across all the different runtimes, be it Deno, Node, Cloudflare Workers, Bun, you name it, as long as it supports Node modules directories. And it's completely open source and free, unlike npm. And it has built-in support by Yarn and pnpm nowadays as well, but not npm. We'll get into that. First off, why did we build JSR? Well, publishing to npm is a bit complicated nowadays. Who has tried to publish to npm and has struggled quite hardly because of like TypeScript or other setup stuff? Okay, some. Yeah, it's a pain, let's be honest. If you want to use TypeScript, first you have to set up all the TypeScript config, make sure that it works correctly, the correct target, etc., etc. And it's just way too difficult, and it doesn't need to be that way. I mean, why can't we just publish TypeScript and have the runtime still be able to use whatever the registry provides? And, well, that's what we tried to do. We basically transpile the TypeScript on the server. We provide all the script types, like all the JavaScript and DTS files separately, including also the source maps. So like, we do everything for you. You don't have to do anything yourself. And npm stopped innovating. Again, the JavaScript ecosystem is known for rapid movement in, like we get a new front-end framework like every week. I don't know. I don't know how many there are at this point. It's too many. But it moves fast. But npm doesn't move at all, which is quite not how things should be, given that it is such a big ecosystem that does evolve quite fast. And then our values are, unlike npm, which is owned by Microsoft, we are completely open. Asterisk, we'll get to that in a second as well. But yeah, it's open source, community and open governance are core principles. We'll see more details into the governance in a second. And then some additional features are tokenless auth. You can just publish from GitHub CI without having to set up tokens, etc. It's all done using OIDC tokens. Provenance, we can give provenance attestations to just prove that the person that published a package actually is the person that it says it is. And then we auto-generate also documentation for all packages based on the exported function definitions, typings, JS docs. And that just makes an overall more grounded experience for users. Because, I mean, when you go to npm, you try to find a package, you find a package, and then you have to dig through documentation. And half of the time, the package doesn't have documentation, or it's like completely out of date. It doesn't need to be that way. So we generated documentation for you. So, the governance. First off, why is JSR open? JavaScript is not controlled by a company, but by a committee. JavaScript implementations are open source, like V8, JS Core, etc. And npm is closed source. The community could not innovate at all. I mean, the npm CLI is open source, but that's not npm itself. It's just the CLI to talk with it. So JavaScript's registry needs to be open source, governed by the community and open to innovation, just like everything else in the JavaScript ecosystem. So the board members for JSR are Evan Yu, the creator of Vue.js and Vite and founder of Void0, Isaac Schluter, the creator of npm and co-founder of VLT, James Snell, Node.js TSC member and principal system engineer at Cloudflare, Luca, software engineer at Deno and T39 representative, who we saw earlier speak, and then Randall, the creator of Node.js and Deno. So these are our board members for the governance group. We add more if necessary or if there's people that are interested, but currently these are the 5 that we started off with. And we have had some board meetings already for which all the notes are published to GitHub. So what does the board even do? It oversees JSR's movement to a foundation. So currently, JSR is not in a foundation. That's why the asterisk earlier. It's currently still part of the Deno company, but the whole goal of JSR is that it's open. So we are currently trying to move it under a foundation. We've had talks with OpenJS, ECMA, and a few other ones, and most of them are interested in being able to host JSR, but it's a slow process. It's not something that goes quite quickly. So we'll see exactly also which of these organizations we go along. Maybe we also go with just creating our own foundation. We'll see. So by the way, the QR code is a link to the charter. So if you want to take a look at the charter, you can see that. And then it also sets the general direction of the project, making decisions on behalf of the project when necessary. This is quite rarely that this is going to be the case, but it is something that will be done if necessary. Determining how government support is elected in the future. So again, adding new members, how will that exactly be? It's not exactly clear yet, but also we have a good set of members for now. We don't seem necessarily need more, but if there's people interested, we'll see to add. And then determining how to review open source contributions to a project. So currently we don't really have much of a policy for anything. I just decide basically on a whim if a PR should go in or not. And it's obviously works for most projects like that, but having also a more stricter policy on how open source contributions should be accepted, and if we have any additional policies around that, would be good to have. Then, additionally, we have a moderation group. Moderation group is Oliver Medhurst, so the creator of Pro4, who we saw earlier, Augustine Moray, who is a contributor to Node.js, and then we have Dr./Bacchus Light, who is a contributor to JSR and Deno for a long time. And the moderation group basically takes care of any of the moderation, so be it support from users, so we have a ticketing system in JSR, or if there's any conflicts, like someone is wanting to has a scope that someone else wants. So it's more about moderating the actual ecosystem of the JSR, all the JSR packages. And we started with these three because it's people we know, but we will expand. The QR code in this case will go through the run book, is what we call, which is basically the policies mostly we follow for doing moderation. It's not set in stone. It's relatively flexible that we move and adjust for giving as much flexibility and usage for the users and not have to moderate too strictly because, I mean, it's an open source project. People should be able to do as much as they can as it's reasonable. Then, behind the scenes of JSR and how it works. So, the CLI and publishing. So, first off, JSR has a configuration file, similar to package.json, which is, contains the name, the version, the license, and an export, which in this case is a string, but it can also be an object. So it's not too different from package.json, but it has some differences, and we don't want necessarily to, if we want to add more things to the config file, and then there's going to be conflicts with package.json, we decided that we rather have our own config file. However, let's see, the publishing flow is this graph basically. So basically there is auth without using any tokens. Basically the CLI makes a request to get a code from the server. The code is basically a random generated code that is just identifiable for like a few minutes. The server then just stores this in its database and then gives it to the CLI, and the CLI basically just prints out a nice URL. You can click on it, and then you get a prompt in the browser that will say, yes, I want to give this device, aka the CLI, permission to interact on my behalf, or no, I don't want to do this. And in the case of yes, it will then start to do a publish. So if the directory is a workspace, then it will basically get a list of, or generate a graph of all the members of the workspace. So it will see which workspace members depend on other workspace members, and it will order them in such a way that it can publish them all in order and also concurrently as much as possible. So if you have like a workspace member that depends on one other workspace member, but there's 5 others that also depend on this one, it will publish all the 6 top ones that depend on the singular one at the same time, because why not? And then, yeah, once we know if we have workspaces or not, we will generate a table for the entire directory. So we upload every file except stuff that's mentioned in the git ignore. And yeah, then it's uploaded to the server. And then the server adds a job to queue the process of the table, which is validate if it's actually valid, that the configuration is set correctly, that there is files that are allowed, the file size is what's supposed to be the names of the package that's being published to, and the name and the config file being correct, etc., etc. There's a bunch of things that are being validated. Then it analyzes the multiple graph and checks for slope types. Slope types is something that we kind of started. I'm not sure, can't remember exactly what the name in TypeScript is, the equivalent, but basically is we don't want people to publish types of public API that does not have full concrete types. For example, returning a function while leaving to inference what the return type of the function is. We give penalty to user for publishing that. We still let you publish, but we'd rather not, because TypeScript is not fast, as we all know, and it's computing the inference of the types of like return functions can sometimes be extremely computational expensive, especially on your LSP, and then sometimes you have to wait like a decent amount for it to just compute, and it's just not good. So as an enforcement, we try to have people publish the typings to have also return types and any other stuff that can be inferred that we'd rather not. Then we create an npm table. So it split the TS files into JS and DTS files and converts JSX to NTSX to JS and all the other fun stuff like that that you would have to do manually yourself. And then that's just stored as a table in the registry, and then npm can fetch that. We'll see that in a second as well. And then it generates documentation information from the typings and the JS comments, and then it's published. So how do package managers work with JSR? So for npm-compatible clients, we have npm.jsr.io. It's not going to load. It's a blank page. If you try to load it in your browser, it's just a service that implements the npm registry API. Basically, npm has then writes registry setup for if like companies want to have internal npm registries, and we just reuse that. And then if you use npm to download the packages, you need to add a .npm-rc and specify the registry, aka being npm.jsr.io, to be a prefix for any packages that start with at JSR. And the JSR CLI does it for you if you try to use the JSR CLI to add dependencies. However, then there's yarn, pnpm, and VLT. They all understand JSR specifiers in the dependencies field in the package.json. So you don't actually have to set anything up. You don't have to use the JSR CLI. You can just use those tools as you want, and they internally point to the JSR npm registry, and it's all abstracted away from the users. And Deno just gets the sources directly. We'll see exactly how that works in a second. But yeah, Deno does not need to download the entire table. It just downloads the files that are necessary. So the module loading is that we currently discover all the JSR specifiers before we start resolving them. Then we will also get the meta.json file, which contains the information about the versions available in the package and the latest version, and also files in those versions, etc., to do some resolution. Because the whole point of JSR also is that it's Semver compatible. That's why we're not just doing plain HTTPS imports. It's you can do Semver deduplication. That's one of the key reasons why we started JSR in comparison to what we had previously for Deno, which was just a HTTPS registry where people could just upload their files, which works, but it gives a lot of problems for if you have like multiple versions of React, which is quite common. And now we can actually deduplicate that with JSR in comparison to our old system. And then it will get the meta file for the specific version, which contains the package manifest, the exports, and module graph for all the entry points. And then we get the requested entry point by the user and any of its dependencies through just simple, regular HTTP or HTTPS, rather HTTPS imports. So JSR specifiers technically are just a nice redirect pretty much to actually just a HTTPS import, which has also the capabilities of doing Semver deduplication. And then it just loads the files. It's just like any other import. So yeah, what's next? So we're going to continue trying to get JSR on the foundation. I mean, it's more of a matter of time and slow processes by these organizations than see that the npm CLI adds native support for JSR. We don't know if that will happen. We'll see, we hope. I mean, if enough people complain, they probably will. And then allow browsers to import JSR packages via HTTPS. We currently don't allow that directly, just because we currently don't want to get burdened by the costs of serving browsers, and that's gonna not be nice. So once we move to a foundation, we will have Cloudflare most likely backing us to some degree, and they have a whole system in place for foundations and open projects to use the infrastructure for free. So then we would be using Cloudflare CDNs, and they would cover all the costs of that. So then we would make HTTPS imports in browsers available for JSR, and then get popular npm packages moved over to JSR. I know already a couple of package developers on npm that have really popular packages that, I mean, they use npm, but they would prefer to use JSR. And the main blocker until now was, well, you have to use this npm-rc, it's not nice, and then you publish to JSR, and then currently there was no, or before there was no way to depend on JSR packages npm, but this is all solved now with the native yarn and pnpm support. So you can actually publish npm packages that depend on JSR, as long as you don't use the npm CLI. So yeah, we'll see exactly how the future of JSR goes forward, and if more projects switch over to JSR. I mean, there's interest being put by big projects, but we'll see how it actually plays out. So thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Leo, do we have any questions in the audience?
I have a bit less technical question about the popular packages moving from npm. About the popular packages that you plan to move from npm and encourage developers. Did you think about the problem of squatting the names of the packages? Because actually, currently, technically, as I see, it's possible to squat some names of the popular packages in JSR, and it will be just can be used as a malicious, with malicious intentions.
Yeah, so that's a good point. We do have a list of the, I think we grabbed the 500 most popular npm packages and scopes, and we have just a JSON file that has a reserved list of scopes, and people cannot register those scopes. Now, additionally to that, we also are, unlike npm, we are responsive to users and companies and other projects trying to do things. Like I heard yesterday about someone trying to have a package on npm, and they've been going on for 2 years with the npm support about getting this package, for which they already have the original GitHub repo, but npm refuses to transfer the package over, which is stupid. And Deno had a similar problem as well for a long time. So we are more responsive to those kinds of support scenarios where if there is a project, let's say TensorFlow, for example, and someone grabbed the TensorFlow scope. Well, if TensorFlow comes to us and says, hey, someone has the scope of us, and then Yeah, we'll just transfer it over then. I mean, first we're going to obviously reach out to the original creators of that scope to see why they have it and if they actually be willing to transfer it, because we're not just going to do it without any permission. But usually it ends up working out, and if it doesn't work out, then that obviously escalates the situation, and we'll see from there. But so far, everything has worked out, and if the author doesn't reply, then we just make it based on our own like on the runbook, and also on just having our own decision-making on, does this make sense to give? I mean, if someone takes TensorFlow, I would just say, give it to TensorFlow people.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Can you talk more about WebAssembly support, or like about if I wanted to publish a WASM module onto JSR, how's this going to work with things like the module loader? Am I going to be able to get support for things like ESM ahead of time? Maybe that would be very cool. WASM ESM, and like in general, like if I have a DTS file that's backed by like a WASM file, which of course I do, does JSR make my life easier relative to what I can do on NPM?
I mean, JSR does support WASM files without a problem. Static inputs of WASM work. It also generates documentation for those WASM files. So if you go to the docs, I mean, I can actually quickly pull up the JSR website. We can go to a random package, and I can quickly show the docs. Oh God, there we go. Like, we have the automated generation of documentation, and it will also, like, if there's a WASM file in this package, let's say, this would also show up here. We do generate documentation also for any WASM files. And if there's an accompanied DTS file, it should just work. If it doesn't, it's a bug, and you can complain to Luca.
Hello, here in the far
Yes.
behind. Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. I fully agree with your problem statement. But in the end, NPM may be owned by Microsoft, but there's some friendly Microsofties behind that massive corporation who actually run it. So the question is, has there been any effort at all in maybe talking to those Microsofties and seeing if there is any interest in converting NPM to more of an open government structure?
I don't know. Luca? Mike?
Okay, that's interesting.
Luca knows, so.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have talked to multiple people at Microsoft, and the general consensus is that it is a project that is too big and too complicated to open source, like the server side of. And yeah, let's talk about this like on the hallway, because some things that I don't want to say it out loud on YouTube.
Yes.
As a package author, one of the blockers for me until finally starting to publish on JSR was the mismatch between what I was doing publishing for NPM in sources versus on JSR and for Deno. In particular, the support for TypeScript, the import from .ts and that. And right now, what I'm noticing as I'm publishing things, I need to, when doing a release, I need to update both my package.json and my JSR.jsonc files. And there's a little bit of a mismatch like this, and I'm sure there's other little stumbling blocks like this. Do you have a plan for increasing the ease of use of being able to, for example, as a simple thing here, being able to refer somehow in a JSR.jsonc to saying, look at package.json for my version file, rather than requiring the same number to be repeated in multiple places, and other information like this?
So funnily enough, we had, so we have an open meeting every 2 weeks, and last open meeting, aka 4 days ago, we actually discussed exactly that. And the consensus was, no, we don't want to infer the version from package.json, because there is many projects that want to version it maybe independently, which is kind of weird, but additionally also is just we don't necessarily want to infer stuff from the package.json because it's not a format we are in control with, which, I mean, this is a big discussion that can be going to the hallway later also, but in the end, we agreed upon that we will just prompt, like give a warning that yes, the version mismatch is there if the package.json has a version that's different than the JSR.json. But for information, you can, when you do like a JSR publish, there's a version flag. So you can specify the version via command line flag. So in your CI system, you could just infer it. But yeah, there's a lot of paper cuts like this. And I mean, in the end, we have an issue tracker with a couple of open issues. So we'll definitely have many things we need to improve on and stuff like that. And like what I just described is not like a final decision that we will not change. It's just what we agreed on for the current time for fastest resolution.
All right.
Okay. Sorry, quick last question, maybe not quick. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about the fact that we can publish TypeScript to the registry natively, but I can also see the tension here that there are past incompatibility between TypeScript and the ECMAScript, like on the class field, and they are pretty, like there were breaking change in TypeScript. So what if there are breaking change in TypeScript in the future, and we have TypeScript already being published to the JSR, and I'm wondering how will JSR handle this situation?
Can you pass the mic behind you? There's an answer.
Yes. So that specifically is, the answer to that is that so Deno has been doing like executing TypeScript for like 7 years now. And there's so far been one case where like there was a change to TypeScript in the emit output that was in any way breaking. And that broke like very, very small number of packages. And like the TypeScript team generally does not break the emit output, even like especially for old features. So whether you emit for these old features or not is like primarily a question of do you want to or not, and not like is there any stability guarantees associated with it. Like they do not break old features generally.
All right. Was that it? Thank you. Well, you can find Leo around at the Hackfest itself or at the after Hackfest activities. But that's it for today, and let's move on to the next presentation. But before that, Leo.
Good.